Today, we're going to learn how to make an ordered list. What's crazy about this list here at Club 1 is that it is in order. Lakes05 has been here the longest, KO-chan's been here second longest, and Sensei J has been here the least. So with that, how do we order a list? Well, the first thing is you need to have values to order. So when the player enters the world, we add their name to a list, so we have a tracking of all the players, and then we also use a player persistent variable to keep track of how many points they have. And so in this case, I know that Lakes05 has visited X number of times, he's earned X number of points, he has more points than KO, and so we put him higher than KO and Sensei. You may remember last year we released a video on ordered scores. Well, there's a new feature that makes this so much easier, and this is done by using add to list at index. We hadn't had this feature before, but this new code block allows us to specify where to place a user into a list. This means we can specifically specify that someone belongs in the middle of the list, or at the top, or the bottom, which was not previously possible. With that, let's go dive in and learn some awesome new scripting techniques. If you are new to scripting, don't worry, we're going to show you some of these techniques, but if you haven't done any scripting at all, I do recommend Hyperjoul's Scripting 101 video. I'll link it here and I'll link it in the description, so check that one out. And without further ado, let's dive right in! Welcome to this blank grid. We're creating on a blank grid today so I can use this in multiple worlds. I encourage you to do that anytime you're working on an asset that you think could be used across multiple worlds. And so now let's go ahead into build mode. Here we are. Now we're going to go open up our menu, head to the Gizmos tab, and pull out the script gizmo. All right. So the first thing we need to think about is if we're going to have ordered scores, players need to have a score, right? Like we need to have a score that needs to be ordered. And so in our case, we're just going to set the score to be random. If you want to learn about player persistent variables, there's lots of great videos on that. But the first thing we're going to do so that we can have a list of ordered scores is create one, which is going to the systems section, clicking on player, then we can click create variable. You can have up to 25 player persistent variables, and we're just going to call this one score. Go ahead and click create, and here you can see our scoreboard variable. Now, if you want to make an ordered list the easy way, I recommend using a leaderboard and checking out any of the leaderboard tutorials. I'll also link one here as well as in the description. Leaderboards are super powerful, and they even have this custom gizmo here that automatically sorts your list for you, so definitely recommend this. The downside to a leaderboard like this is you can only have 3 of them, and if you only want to order the people in your world, this is ordering everyone who has ever been in your world, which is not as fun for users when they're like trying to see where they rank against their friends who are active in the world. So this is great, but it's not necessarily the best method. We're going to go ahead and open up our script gizmo, and here we have when world is started. We actually don't need this today, so we're going to go ahead and pull down to delete. We'll name this ordered scores version 2. And what is the first thing we need to do? Well, we need to say when player enters world. So under player events, we'll see player enters the world. And this is when we want to give that player a random score value. So we'll go to the values tab where we can set player persistent variable, drag that over and place that here. And we're going to drop down, select score. And right now it's setting it to 0. We'll drag the player pill down, and then back on our operators tab, we'll scroll down to random numbers, and we're going to bring over random number, which is actually an integer. It's important to note that player persistent variables cannot have decimals, which does stink, but we do need to make sure it has a whole value. We'll then go to our values tab and select a number input. We're going to go put 0 in the left, and our max is going to be 100. And now when they enter the world, they're going to get a random score between 0 and 100. Now this might not be the most ideal way to give points to somebody. I mean, you could do that, and that's by all means, please give people random scores. But when we're trying to order something, it usually has a purpose. So maybe they're throwing a frisbee, and if they get it through a goal, they get a point, and then you're ordering the scores. But for the purposes of our demonstration, we're just going to give them random score values just to show the sorting portion of this video. Now, when the world is entered by a player, we also need to create a list of all the players in the world. So we're going to head to our variables tab and create a new player variable. And this is going to be called players online. And then make sure to check the list option and click confirm. At the bottom of our operators tab, you're going to find the list section where you'll find add to list. Let's go and drag that over, and we're going to add the player. So drag that into the value slot, and then we're going to go to the variables tab and bring the variables into the list slot. Now we've added that player to the list. Now in some very rare cases, the when world is started event will go off multiple times. In that case, we do need to prevent that from causing some issues. And to do that, we grab the if control code block that above the add, and then we're going to go to our operators tab, and you're going to see there's an option here for does list contain item. This returns a true or false value. We're going to need this, but first we're going to scroll to the top where we can get the not operator, because we only want to add the player if they are not in the list. Back here at the bottom, we'll grab list contains item, placing that into the not pill, and then we'll drag list, and then thumbsticking to the right, we can duplicate, and then we'll do that here as well. And now we're saying if the list does not contain the player, we will then drag this up and notice the white bar. We want to indent that. There we go. And now we've added the player to the list only if they're not already in the list. Now, inversely, when the player leaves the world, we need to remove them from the list. So we'll head back to our events tab. Under player events, we're going to grab when player exits world, placing that here. And now we want to say if the player is in the list, remove them from the list. And so it's basically the exact same thing. So we'll just duplicate this here, delete this, and then grab the contains item. Thumbsticking to the right, we can now see if the list does contain the player. No, we do not want to add them again, so we'll go ahead and delete that. And then back on our operators tab at the very bottom, we'll see remove item from lists. We're going to drag that indented into the if, and then again bringing down the player pill, thumbsticking to the right for the player list. You can also grab the player list again from the variables tab. I just find duplicating with my thumbstick is very easy and fast. This is awesome. We now have a list of all the players who are online. Now what we need to do is order these players. And to do that, we're going to need to create a new variable, and this is going to be the ordered list. So it's another player list. So we'll check the list box and call this ordered players. The next question you need to ask yourself is what object is running this score list? And in most cases for me, I like to run it on a text object. And so the final result of what we're doing is displaying text on self. Now you could have this event called, like every time somebody's score gets updated, you could send an event to this text object and say update text, or you can have it loop. And so in our case, we're just going to have this loop from world start. So we're going to go back to our events tab, scrolling to the top, grabbing when world is started, and then grabbing when event is received. We're going to create a loop. So drop down, click new event, and type in the name loop. And then we'll go ahead and click confirm. Now we need to cause this loop to actually loop. Right now, they're just things that could happen, but there's not actually a thing happening. So we'll go over here to send event with delay. We'll drag that into loop, select loop from the drop down, and the delay on this is going to be every 10 seconds. I recommend 10 seconds because this event is going to use some very complex math that can be relatively intense. And if it was running really frequently, could lag your experience out. And most of the time, people aren't looking at the ordered list more than once every 10 seconds. So this usually does work pretty well in my worlds. So there we go, sending loop, but we need to cause it to go off when world is started. And so for that, we're going to go grab send event to object, dropping that into the when world is started event, and drop down and select loop. Now when the world is started, we send loop to self and then cause loop to continue sending to self every 10 seconds. And during this loop, the final action is displaying text on self. And so what I like to do is create a variable. This is a new variable, and it will be a string variable called display me. We'll go click confirm. And now what are we displaying it on? Well, we're displaying it on self, but that's an action. So under actions, grab the display text action, dropping it into loop, and then grab the variable display me, dropping it to replace the S. And we're displaying that on self. Now, all we have to do is build a list that is in order. And to do that, what we're going to do is compare the players one at a time and then add them to the ordered list, and then compare those players and then add them to the list. And because we know they have a number value as a score, and that's how we're going to be ranking them, we're going to create another list of numbers, and this will be called scores. It'll be a number variable and it will be a list. So we'll check that and click confirm. There we go. In addition to the scores list, we're going to create another number variable called current score, and that will not be a list. So we'll go ahead and click confirm. And this will allow us to figure out what is the current score that we'll be adding to the scores list. The next step is we need to create a while loop. While loops are pretty complex. If you've never used one before, don't be too worried. I'm going to walk you through this, but they're found under control under the events tab. We're going to drag while over to the top of our loop event. And then to use while, we're going to need some values. So I'm going to create a new number value called iterator and click confirm. And now that we have iterator, we're going to go to the values tab, scrolling to the top. We can grab set2 and place this at the beginning of the loop. We're going to set that iterator value. So we'll go and drag that over into the top here. And we're going to go to our values tab, a number input of 0, placing that into the right side. Now, the way a while loop works is it's going to run while some condition is true. And so you can think of a condition being like, while the iterator is less than 10, and then during the while loop, we iterate +1, +1, +1, which means it'll run 10 times. But in our case, we're going to do something a little bit tricky. What I like to do here is use that same concept. From the top of the operators tab, grab the less than symbol, placing that into the condition slot. Scrolling down to the bottom, we're going to grab length of list. We'll place one of these into both the B slot and the A slot. And what we're going to say is as long as the length of the ordered list is less than the length of the online list, we know that we haven't finished making the list. But the moment those lists are equal, meaning it's no longer less than, then we have finished making the list and we no longer want to continue looping. So we're going to grab the players online, putting that into the right side, and then we'll go to our variables tab to grab the ordered player list and put that into the left slide. Now there's a trick here that we can use. We know that the first player to be added to the ordered player list will always be in position 0. And so I actually do this before we get into the while loop. So up here, we're going to add a player and a score to the respective lists. So under the operators tab, we're going to grab just the plain old add to list and drop that right below the iterator. Then on our variables tab, grabbing the ordered players list and putting that into the right side. And then we'll grab the scores list, putting that into the second one's right side. And the value we're going to be adding is the first player from the players online list, which is iterator 0. So that's player at iterator 0. And we can get that from our operators tab, where we'll find get item from list, which we'll place into the left slot. And if you're having trouble with this, I recommend thumbsticking to the right a few times. Sometimes that can help if you're having trouble placing the code block in. And now it says get item at number from list. And the item number is the iterator. So we can drop iterator in here. You could also drop the number 0 since we know it will always be 0. And then the list is the players online list. So again, I'll thumbstick to the right to duplicate that in there. And now we've added the first player from the players online list to our ordered player list. And we need to know what score do they have. And so to do that, we're going to our values tab. And from the values tab, we'll find get player persistent variable. We'll drop that into the left side here, drop down, select score. And the current player is that same player, get item iterator. So we'll thumbstick to the right. And now we've added the score that this first player has to the scores list. And so the benefit of doing this is so that during our while loop, we have something to compare against, which brings us to our next step. From our events tab, grab the if control and place this indented into the while loop. If it doesn't indent like that, you can drag it up and just try to get that white bar. Fantastic. Now we're also going to need an else. So I'm going to grab that right now. So go ahead and grab an else and place that below the if. You want to make sure the indenting is not indented into the if, but actually below it, which you can see can be difficult. So to go ahead and play with that. And sometimes what I find is easiest is if I place it above the if, I can then just drag the if above that. Now with our if condition, what we're trying to compare is the current score of our next player to the current iterative. It's going to be so complex, but we're going to walk through it step by step. So the first thing we're going to do is set the current score. From our values tab, grab set to, placing that above the if. And then on our variables tab, we'll grab current score, placing it into the left side of the set to. Now we're going to set current score to be the get player persistent variable score for the next player. So what we do is grab this one here and thumbstick to the right to duplicate it in here because it's basically the same except for one key factor. Over here where we're getting item from the players online list, we are not getting the iterator item from the players online list. So we can go ahead and delete iterator. If we go to our operators tab, length of list. And so when you think about this, the length of the ordered players list will always be the number representing the next player to be added. So remember, in lists, 0 represents the first item in the list. And so when we get length of list on an empty list, it gives us item number 0. But we've already added one player to the list. And so that means when we say length of list, it returns number 1, and number 1 represents the second player in the list. So if we say get item at the length of ordered players, which we know is 1, from the players online list, we are then getting the next player that's going to be added. So this is fabulous. All right, we now know which player we're working with, and we've got it used right here. And in many cases, this is totally fine to just, pull out a player, yada, yada, yada. But we're going to be using this player over and over again. And so it's best practice to create a variable in this case. So we're going to go and create a new player variable, and we're going to call this current player. Go ahead and click confirm. And then on our values tab, grab the set to and drop it above set current score. Over here, we can set that new variable we created for current player to be all of that we had to calculate to figure out this player. So we only have to do this one time. So we'll go grab get item and place this into the right side. And then we can grab current player and thumbstick to the right. And oh my gosh, that looks easier to read, doesn't it? Like that is so much nicer. So now we're setting current score for the score of the current player. Brilliant. So much easier. easier. So the question we're asking ourselves is, where do we place this player into the ordered list? Where do we place their score into the ordered list? And the answer is, if the value is greater, we place it at the current iterator position, which is currently set to 0. By doing this, we will have pushed the other player back one space and put this player at the beginning. So the question we're asking is, under our operators tab at the very top, we can grab the less than symbol and place this into the if. And we want to know if the previous player has a score that is less than, because if they do, we're going to place our player into the list above you. So we're going to grab current score, putting this into the B slot, and then we need to get their previous score. At the bottom of the operators, we're going to go and grab get item from list, placing this into the A slot, and the item we're getting is at the iterator position. So we'll go and grab iterator, and the list is the scores list. So I'm trying to see if I have it up here. I do. You can also run and grab these from the variables tab, but now we're getting the item at iterator position 0, which we know is the position of the current player we're comparing against. And that position is going to return their score. And if their score is less than our score, we want to add that current player to the list. So we'll go and grab add value at indexed to list. Now this allows us to specify exactly where we want to add the player. So now we can say add the current player. And we actually want to duplicate this because we're also adding the current score at the index iterator to both of those lists. So we put scores list in the bottom, and then we do the ordered players list here. And like that, we'll be able to cycle to the next player. And so to cycle to the next player, we also need to grab this set iterator to 0 and duplicate this into the if. This allows us to reset, because what if it is not less than the current score? Well, that means we need to move down one. And so that's where our else statement comes in. And we say else, we're going to set iterator to +1. And so we'll grab iterator and then put 0, and then we'll change that to a 1. Now we've got iterator goes up 1, but there is a thing that can happen here, which is that you get to the end of the list and this person is less than everybody. They're not very great, right? They're at the bottom of the list, and that's okay. It's okay to be at the bottom of the list. And so when that happens, the script as it's currently written will break. And that's because we don't have any way to account for that scenario. And so to do that, we're going to go to our events tab, grab another if code block. We'll also grab another else code block and place that below the if. And so in our else, we'll move this set iterator. And the condition we're checking for is to see if we've reached the end of the list. So remember, right now, when we've started with our first player, we are at position 0. Position 0 is the end of the list. And so we're currently at iterator position 0 when we start. And that really is the end of the list, right? Like there's only one player there. And if you go iterator 1 and try to compare against a position 1, there is nobody there. What we want to say is if the iterator is greater than or equal to the length of the list minus 1. And I'll walk you through that again, but let's just go and drag it over first. So we grab the greater than or equal to symbol, place that into our if, and then we're going to put iterator into the left side. And then what we're doing is getting length of list minus. So we have to pull the minus symbol over first. We're going to go ahead and -1 right off the bat. And then we need to go grab length of the ordered score list, which we happen to have right here. So I'm going to just go bring that down. There it is. And thumbstick to the right. So now we've taken the length of the ordered player list, which we know is currently at 1, right? So iterator 0 represents this person at 1. And if we subtract 1, we're going to get a value of 0. And so this is going to say if iterator 0 is greater than or equal to 0, which it is, then we need to do all of this, but at the last position in the line. Now that we know we've made it to the end of the list, what we want to do is add the current player and the current score to the end of those lists. And there's actually a code block that does this really well. It's called add to list. So we're just going to bring this over and into the if and duplicate it twice and literally do exactly what we did up here, just without specifying a position. So we're going to duplicate current player, duplicate current score, grab the ordered players list, grab the current scores list, and this adds the player and the score to the end of both of those lists. We also need to set the iterator back to 0 because we're going to start from the beginning. And now over here, you have an else. So if we're not at the end of the list, we add 1 and we continue with the next person in the list. Okay, we have done it. We've made it to the end of creating an ordered list. And now it's time to display something. Now there are a few ways to display an ordered list. I've for fun said convert list variable to string, and you can display it that way. Not very pretty though. So what we need to do is create another while loop, and we're actually going to need a second iterator. Anytime you run a while loop in an event, you need a second iterator. I think we need to run this in a separate event, because if we try to run the while loop here, they're going to happen simultaneously and it will not be accurate. And so we need a display event. So the loop event's going to loop through constantly ordering, and then we need a display event to display the current list. So in fact, we're going to move display into a new event. So under events tab, grab when event is received, dropping this at the bottom, and we're going to call this event display and click confirm. And now when the display is received, we'll drag display down into here. We're going to need to create another while loop. And then I do need to send display to self. It's not been sent yet. So we'll grab send event to object, placing that before the loop, and drop down and select display. Now display is going to happen about 0.1 seconds later, which gives just enough time for the while loop to happen. And now we can run another while loop. And so in this while loop, I do recommend creating another iterator for this just in case. So we'll call this one iterator 2. You might be okay to use the original one, but it's nice to have two separate ones. Now we're going to go to the top of our values tab and grab a set to, where we're going to set iterator 2 to 0. This resets it if it had been previously used. So I'm going to bring down the 0, thumbsticking to the right to duplicate. Back on our events tab, we'll go ahead and grab a while loop, and then we need to say, what is the condition? Now previously we did some really fun stuff, but in this case, we're actually going to use the example I'd given you, which is while the iterator is less than the length of the list. And so this is going to allow us to start at the top of the list and work our way through. So we're going to go to the top of our operators tab, grabbing the less than symbol, bringing that into the condition slot, and grab iterator 2, putting it into the A slot. And then we need to grab at the bottom, it's a lot of switching back and forth here, and we're going to grab length of list, placing that into the B slot. And then the list that we're going to get the length of is the ordered players list. So we'll go ahead and thumbstick to the right. And now what do we do during this? Well, we need to add to the display me value. So actually we need to set display me to be empty. So I'm going to duplicate this here, set display me not to 0, but we need to go to our values tab and grab a string input. And this string input will be cleared out. So I just hit backspace and now there's nothing there. We now have an empty string. And so while this iterator is less than the length, we need to increase the iterator, right? So it looks like we actually have one here. I'm going to go and thumbstick this in and duplicate it. I love just duplicating things, makes life so much faster. But this is for the original iterator, and we need to thumbstick to the right and replace with iterator 2. And now we do this before. So this is important. All of these code blocks happen before the iterator gets increased in value, because remember, the first item is at position 0. We start at 0. And then when we get to the last position, which is the length of list, we don't want to run. So that's why this set to happens at the very end of our while loop. And so the next thing we're going to do is grab this set, thumbsticking to the right to duplicate it here. We can actually go ahead and delete this string input, and we need to put a couple plus symbols in here. I'm going to grab some clean ones from the top of our operators tab, and we need to add a few things together. And this is kind of up to you with how complex you want to get. I am going to go with that complex. That's pretty complex. What I'd like to do actually here is, instead of setting display me to an empty string, we're going to set it to say top players. I'll put a colon at the end. And then the first thing that needs to happen here at the very beginning of our display me is we need to break to a second line. So we're going to grab a string input, placing it here in the A slot, and type in the code for break. So that's BR. And so if you've never typed one in, that's what it looks like. And that will break it to a second line. And then as I'm thinking about that, I'm like, I kind of want to underline this too. So I'm actually going to add the symbol for underline. So that's what the underline symbol is. And then we also need to clear out the underline after that. So we'll go and add the slash variant, which removes the underline. So you can see that's how you add an underline to the title. And then down here, we need to add the name of the current player. So back on our operators tab, when we scroll down to player, you'll see there is an option to get the name of the current player. So we'll go ahead and drag that into here. And which player is it? Well, it is the get item from list. So we'll go and grab get item from list. And we are getting the item at the current iterator 2 position from the ordered player list. So that's player list number 0. And we also want to add to this and say, what is their score? And so what I like to do here is put a little gap. So I grab a string input, and then I put in a space. I put an upward slash, another space, and then in this final B slot, this is where we're going to put their score. It is a number variable, so that needs to be converted to a string. So we grab the variable as string code block, drop that into the B, and then we're going to use this exact same get item iterator from list, thumbsticking the right into here. But instead of it being the ordered players list, we go to our variables tab and grab the scores list and drop that right there. Oh my goodness, we've done it. And then it displays. Okay, we have created a list. And I got to be honest with you, creating a script like this, I've done this one a couple times, so I'm pretty confident this is going to work, but it is best when you're making making a complex script like this to have multiple tests below. So normally I'd have this displaying as I'm working on it so I can kind of test it and like see how is it working, find any bugs early on. But let's go see, is there any bugs? That's the real question. Did we do a good job? And so we're going to go and click attach the script ordered scores. And I am realizing there is one bug we're going to want to fix in a second, but I guess we got to try this out first. Clear, stop. And so the trick here is that right now it's trying to run when the world is started. And since no one's in play mode, it's like there's nobody here. There's no scores. And so that's the current bug. So I'm going to go ahead and hit play. And you're seeing that we're getting can't get list item because there's nobody online. I'm going to stop the world while we fix this and click clear. And then over here in our loop, we need to do something quite silly, but also quite important, which is to say that when this loop is received, only does all these actions if there are players in the list. So from our operators tab, we're going to grab the greater than symbol, put that into our if code block. And what we're trying to do is say, is there players online? And so we'll go and grab the value 0. So number input 0 goes into the B slot. And then in the A slot, we're going to grab the length of online players. So we go and put A here and then grab the players online. And so if there are players online, we run this loop. Otherwise, we just keep looping and wait for the next one to go off. So now I have to do this really tedious task of adding all of these into the if code block. All of these except our display and loop variables. Fantastic. Okay, so now that is set up. Oh, except the display also needs to be indented. Yep, so let's go and indent this above the while and then move the while above that, which allows us to place it right at the end. Perfect. And then loop is going no matter what. Okay, so I did realize there's one other script error, but this should function, I hope. So Jay and KO, if you guys can go into play mode, I'm going to go ahead and hit play. If I join the world, oh, there it is. Why don't you guys go into build mode and back into play mode? Since the J48. So we're only getting one name to display right now, which is quite strange, but this is how we find errors, right? So good job, us. We found errors. It seems to be switching back and forth between Jay and I. So the problem may be with the display loop, but let's see. There's no bugs in our console. I'm going to go ahead and click stop. Then we're going to come back into our script and see what did we do wrong in our ordered score list. When display is received, set iterator to 0, set display me to top players. It's not even displaying the top players section of that. Okay, sorry. Super simple mistake. We need to take this set to, duplicate this in here, delete this, and then we need another plus symbol. I thought I had enough plus symbols, but I was missing one. So this plus symbol here allows us to concatenate onto display me. So we thumbstick to the right, and the word concatenate is a fancy way of saying add to. So then we can do, or not duplicate, but just drag this up and into here. And now we will be adding to the display me list and actually properly displaying. Now, the error that I'm thinking we might reach here is that if there isn't two players online, it's going to try and compare against a player that doesn't exist, which is problematic. So I do need to solve for that in a moment, but let's just see if this works. So I'm going to go ahead and hit play. Everybody enter the world. Go ahead and enter KO and Jay. Oh, there it is. Look at that. And it works. And if I join the world in 10 seconds, we should see my name. Jay, you got like a perfect score, 99 out of 100. Dude, that's an A. KO, you got an 82. Oh, I got, what? What is happening, Jay? Why are you up here so many times? Oh, I know what it is. Oh my gosh. I love this. This is why we do all this testing. It's to find these bugs. So the reason Jay is on here so many times is because our ordered list is not clearing itself. So up here in this loop, when we set iterator to 0, we're also supposed to clear out the list. And so up down here under list, we can say clear list, and we need to clear out this list at the very beginning every single time. So we need to clear our scores list, clear scores. We also need to clear our ordered players list. So I'll go ahead and do that as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and hit play. Everybody go ahead and join the world again. Here we go. KO and Jay are in. I'm in as well. There should be a text object appearing any second now. Yeah, look at that. And it is ordered correctly. 71, 25, 12. We've done it. We've got an ordered list. It is looking pretty fine. Fine and fancy. I would like maybe a little bit more spacing between these, but looking pretty good. And it's not changing probably because we're all here and like our scores don't change. So if I go into build mode, I'm now going to fall off the list any second now. Come on, pull off the list. Yeah! Oh, yes. I'm so happy. I wasn't sure if that was going to work. Haha. Okay, we've done it. We've created an order list. Now we're going to do this scary thing. KO, leave the world. Or, go into build mode. Because this should break when there's only one player online. I'm pretty confident it breaks when there's only one player. Let's see. Checking my list. Oh, unbelievably, it's not breaking. Why is it not breaking? I wouldn't complain normally because this is pretty solid. Good to have things work. Jay, why don't you leave the world and let's see if it breaks again with 0 players online. Because it is actually possible for there to be 0 players online. This happens when a player leaves your world, but someone's already in transit to your world and they arrive immediately after. So it is definitely something worth considering. As far as I can tell though, it's not running the display event because there's nobody online. So let's actually all go back in and just make sure it is still functioning. And we can dethrone Jay with his 71 and all get new scores. Yay. Hey, Sensei still in the lead. And I somehow got like the worst score possible, but second is the best. So what can I say? This is great. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, we have a working leaderboard here. I do want to understand why it's working. There's a lot of math happening up there in our while loop. So maybe I just did a good job, but taking a quick peek, we say while the length, I guess because the length, that makes sense because there's only one player in the list, right? So it just doesn't run the while loop. It literally doesn't run the while loop when there's only one player online. Oh, it's brilliant. Never mind. We're good to go. Hey, I'm so happy. You so happy. We so happy. We did it. Ordered scores. Yep. Everybody wave their hands in the air and I guess we got to sign off. So thank you and thank you and thank you and all of you who got to the end of this video. We can't wait to see you in Horizon. Can't wait to see what you'll create. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments and we will be adding this to the Essentials bundle. So look forward to that. And other than that, we will see you in Horizon. Don't forget to like and subscribe, ring that bell, and bye.